Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heave is gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me. Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parish, and I'm joined today by Rob Fischer. Rob, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Doing okay. All things considered.
Yeah.
This episode, we got a lot to get to. There's Steven Adams allegedly traded. Steven Adams traded. The Grizzlies played
You think we can trust Woj?
I think this one feels secure. I mean, it's gone through. I got the email, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. It did go through. It did go through.
Yeah.
We don't have to say alleged anymore.
Yeah. The Grizzlies Twitter account put out a little thing. So
that's right.
No, we're good. It's official. So Steven Adams got traded. The Grizzlies played a basketball game. Marc Gasol announced his retirement. The team announced Marc Gasol jersey retirement ceremony date. The All-Star reserves were announced. And like several days ago, Vince Williams Jr. was snubbed from the Rising Stars game. So we got a lot to get to. And it's funny because a little peek behind the curtain, I wanted to have you on. I mean, I want to have you on whenever you want to come on, but I pick my spots. Right. I don't want to wear out Rob. And I'm looking at the schedule and I'm like, all right, the Grizzlies play back-to-back Thursday, Friday. Do I really want to do like 4 to 5 hours of work to pump out an episode that comes out at like 1 p.m. on a Friday when they're going to play that night? You know, that'd be a great day for a great Rob Fischer, a little back and forth. Right. We'll punch out half an hour. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, perfect.
But now I get you on Steven Adams trade day and Marc Gasol retirement day and all that. I want to start, Rob. What was the mood like at the game on Thursday night? Because this news broke like 5:45 roughly. And what was the mood like at the arena?
Well, I think everybody had their phones up and everybody looked at each other and said, did you see that? Did you see that? Did you see that? And I think it was a surprise.
Sure.
Maybe more so for the timing, because you had heard Steven Adams' name as a possible guy, that could be dealt. His contract, more than anything, could be dealt with the Grizzlies looking for some financial flexibility. So I think everybody kind of realized it was a possibility. I guess the timing surprised everybody a little bit more, that it wasn't closer to the deadline. And it's surprising as well, because the Grizzlies are a team that they're very good at keeping things quiet. And, so you didn't see it coming, really. I mean, there were no leaks. There were no reports of the Grizzlies are looking to move Steven Adams. There was nothing about Houston. So I think it comes as a surprise whenever the Grizzlies make moves. And this one came as a surprise for sure. One of the guys in the starting five that we just haven't seen for the last 3 years, and he's gone. And it's 3 years now. We're only 21 games the starting five played together, and so it's unfortunate. I love Steven Adams. I think he was great for this team. I think the timing is good, though, because a couple of things. One, it could mean that more things are coming. And two, now you have this time to figure out what you're going to do at that position for next year. Whether that's, or do you feel like Jaren Jackson's the guy that would be your five, and you go out and get a Bulldog rebounder that maybe plays the four, or is it now, you start to settle in and target guys who could be the starting center position for next year? So I think it gives you a lot of time to figure things out as well. I'm not surprised Steven was moved. I was just surprised more at the timing than anything.
Yeah, I think it definitely surprised me. And I mean, maybe I just hadn't heard a lot of people talking about like this could be an avenue the Grizzlies would go. The thing you mentioned about like now they can try to find a different starting center, like there's so many big angles to that, but like that's a huge one where I think there's some relief probably maybe among Grizzlies fans, that it removes a giant question mark just of his health, where you have this still young core of John, Desmond, and Jaren. And basically this year and then going into next year, it was going to be, well, if Steven Adams is healthy, we do this. But now at least maybe it's like pulling the Band-Aid off. You get it over with. You're like, all right, we didn't have to wait for that scenario. Like, what happens if he's not okay? Then like we're in the last year of his deal. So them going ahead and resolving that, like that is one, I would say it's a benefit to the trade. Obviously you replenish your second round picks. So the actual deal, for anyone who doesn't know, the Grizzlies trade Steven Adams for the salary of Victor Oladipo, and they get 3 second round picks. One of them is kind of bad. It's the Thunder pick from this year. The other two are pretty good. They're like the best of a Warriors and Nets pick next year. That could be pretty high. Or maybe that's the one this year. And then there's like a, maybe the Rockets own next year, but they're decent second round picks. And the Grizzlies, of course, had exhausted a lot of their future second round picks in previous deals, draft day deals, and trading for Luke Kennard and such. So like, you get some second round picks, but you also, remove that worst case scenario. Maybe that's what Chris Harrington wrote in his article in the Daily Memphian. Like, the worst case scenario was Steven Adams is not okay next year. And you get there, and now you have this salary you can do nothing with. I'm slightly surprised, not just that the trade happened. I'll say, frankly, a little surprised someone paid to trade for Steven Adams. Like, because there's no small amount of risk that, maybe the Rockets feel like it's worth it. And maybe there's just some of that added locker room leadership that I think Steven Adams provides, and that's going to be sorely missed, I think, by the Grizzlies. He's going to be sorely missed just for like his media stuff. I mean, the man was hilarious and candid and fun to talk to. So like,
we could never talk to him. We could never talk to him on the walk-off interviews, though.
Oh,
because we were afraid he would cuss.
Swearing. Yeah.
Yes. The first I did a walk-off with him one time, and it was in Miami. And my first question was, Steven, what adjustments did you guys make at halftime? And he threw an F-bomb at me and says, I don't know. And I was like, oh, geez, here we go. And we never had him again. And he actually asked me one time, he said, how come you guys never have me? And I said, because you can't stop cussing. And he's like, it's not my fault. I don't mean to do it. So, I loved Steven. He was great. You're right. Great locker room guy. The players loved him. I mean, it was an odd dynamic because of, how old he was and just how different he is than these young guys on this team. Yet he, was like a big brother, I think, to all these guys. And I think the way that he had his teammates back, and the way that he, was the physical guy and didn't let anybody mess with his guys. And, that stuff's going to be missed for sure. But I think you're right. The biggest question is can he play again?
Yeah.
and I don't know if we know that. So you're right, to get paid to get him out was a little surprising to me. I mean, the Oladipo deal is great because he expires this year. So that comes off the books, and then getting the 3 second round picks as well. So, I think it was something that the Grizzlies probably looked at and thought the same situation. Is he a part? Is he going to be a healthy part of what we're doing? And we need to make sure of that. And I don't know if that's I don't know if there's a definite answer to that right now.
Yeah, and then the obvious downsides, I think, to this trade, besides losing a popular player and a guy you like, and also all my New Zealand listeners, which were significant.
Right.
This is bad for business. I'll be real. It's been a bad for business year. No Ja Morant, now losing Steven Adams. Right. But this move was made, of course, because of the NBA's salary cap rules and because of luxury tax reasons. And the Grizzlies were projected to be over the second apron next year, which is something that basically all the owners, I'm going to say, my words, not yours, Rob, sort of colluded to make these punishments so extreme that they're like, well, we can't do this. This punishes our team so badly if we go over these rules. And so they've depressed that like no teams now basically are going to go over the second apron. And so the Grizzlies did have to cut salary. And this move assists with that. We're like, all right, maybe we can now keep Luke Kennard, or maybe we can actually use a little bit of salary to bring somebody in. But the problem is, and I think the big downside to this is, now you're like, well, how do we get a player who was as good as healthy Steven Adams? How do we get another starting center? And that's the question. Like, well, you don't have that many avenues actually. And now, in my estimation, the odds of finding a starter, center or otherwise, who is as good as Steven Adams was, it's kind of remote. Like, now you have to basically, in my mind, bargain shop. I mean, of course, maybe there's more deals to come, because like you said, it's a week before the deadline. So I feel like one of the big downsides is, this is what a lot of teams have to deal with now who have good players that they've paid. It becomes really hard to fill out your roster, and you see like the Grizzlies turn this salary into a smaller salary. And then if they just let that expire next year, just to keep their overall team salary low, you basically can't replace someone who is as good as Steven.
Yeah, I think the one thing this organization has done is they've done a good job of targeting players that they've wanted and have been aggressive trying to pursue those players. And I think they'll target someone, and I don't think they go into this just thinking that we'll figure it out.
Sure.
I think it's I think they probably have targets in mind or a plan in mind. I think what's really going to be interesting here is in the next week, are other moves made? Are they just dump offs or in trying to pick up more assets and more picks, or do you really try and go after someone that you're targeting for your future? Do you do that mid-season now? Maybe if that deal's available, you do. But I think the timing of this move makes me feel like there's more to come. And I'd be surprised if there's not. This team's been very active. See some rumors today about the guys that are interested, and teams that are interested in some of the guys on the Grizzlies. And so you wonder where they're going to go from here and how they're going to fix that. Bottom line is next year, you're going to need to replace that center position. And your bench has got to get better.
Yeah.
And if you can start doing that now, great. Or start clearing space to be able to do that in the off season. Great. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably what we'll see here over the next week with the Grizzlies is clearing roster spaces and clearing money so they can go out and replenish not only their bench, but they're going to have to at least get one starter, maybe two. So
another benefit of the Adams deal is we knew there was this roster crunch this season where you more than likely wanted to go ahead and promote G.G. Jackson and get him a real contract so he doesn't go into restricted free agency in the offseason. And so we've always been looking like, all right, so I think as fans, we're like, all right, we got to get rid of one of maybe the wings because you don't need to carry all those guys. But this trade now, getting rid of Steven Adams, clears up some of your questions going forward, of course, from the front court. But you assume if they don't trade Oladipo, like they have Oladipo's salary, they can still use that and maybe trade that to someone else for something different, before the trade deadline. Even if they don't, that becomes the clear and obvious. They're going to waive him. And then you can use that roster spot to add G.G. Jackson to the main roster. And that frees up another two-way spot when you promote G.G. Jackson. And maybe one of these guys they signed in the last week, like Trey Jemison. We saw Trey Jemison against the Cavaliers have a huge block on Jared Allen and score his first NBA buckets. Like, they'll move G.G. Jackson up. They'll, then give, they'll have another two-way spot to work with. So like they do have those options. And again, like you said, the week before the trade deadline, and there's rumors like Yahoo's reporting that there's a lot of playoff teams interested in Xavier Tillman. So like, yeah, I think they're probably doing this early to go ahead and get some other stuff done. And it was vaguely reminiscent. It's kind of funny. Like it was done on February 1st, which was the date in Grizzlies franchise history where they traded away Pau Gasol. And that deal, my memory was everyone was stunned that it came like a couple weeks before the trade deadline back then. And of course the criticisms there, mine and everyone else's at the time, were, why didn't they ask for more? Of course we know how it turned out amazingly well. You could argue and say it's the best trade in Grizzlies franchise history because it brought in Marc Gasol. So Marc Gasol, we can talk about him now for a little bit. That arguably the best player in Grizzlies franchise history again. Like the only Grizzlies player to ever be first team All NBA, the only Grizzlies player to ever start in the All-Star game. Of course, you know, one of the best players along with Zach and Mike Conley during the Core 4 era. And I mean, maybe my favorite player of all time. I don't know. Like Tony Allen's probably my favorite because I feel it's more unique, but like the way my heart swelled for Marc Gasol was just, you know, it was great. And so he announced his retirement from professional basketball, and that allowed the team to announce the jersey retirement ceremony is going to be on April 6th against the 76ers. A little benefit there. Nick Nurse, Mark's coach from the Raptors, he will be in attendance, of course. Maybe Mike Conley can make it. The Timberwolves don't play that night. So
Maybe
it'll be a fun time. Maybe the Grizzlies PA announcer will read off Joel Embiid's career stats against Mark on that night. I think that would be a cool thing, maybe to point out, hey, this guy, you're Mr. 70-point scorer, reigning MVP. Have you seen his stats when playing against Mark? Not good.
Not good.
But what are your, I don't know how to like, I don't want to ask you to sum up Mark in like a minute. But like, what are some of your most fond and cherished memories of Marc Gasol and what he meant to the franchise?
First of all, as a person, you know, being lucky enough to be around those core 4 guys for their entire careers in Memphis and growing up with them, you know, Mark and Mike especially, and you know, they got married in their time in Memphis, and I did, and we all had kids. And so my fondest memories of Mark are just seeing him in the hallways and him asking how the kids are doing and me asking how his kids are doing. And just, you know, he was always engaging. He was always, he was a guy that, or is a guy that, I shouldn't talk about him in the past tense, but he is a guy that, you know, genuinely, cares about people, and I think he cared about, you know, everybody that was in the organization, and he was just wonderful. My daughter, during COVID, my daughter did a series on Twitter called Keegan Sports, where she interviewed sports people, and you know, she was like, I guess like 8 years old at the time, and Mark came on her show. I got a picture of Mark and her where he's hugging her. And I mean, he was so good with kids and he's so good with my daughter, that she just loves Mark. And you know, so those are the memories that I really cherish from Mark. And then as a player, I mean, just his competitive spirit was, you know, it was unmatched in those days. He was the smartest guy on the floor always. And he did what a lot of great players do, and that's hate losing. You know, even more so than winning, even more than loving winning. He hated to lose, and it was never about him. He was always unselfish, sometimes to a fault. But I think that his competitive spirit and his desire to win will be something that I always remember from Marc Gasol. And you know, he came out and played the same way night in and night out, and that was to do his best to try and help the team win.
Yeah, that competitive spirit, I feel like, really came across. I remember early in his tenure on the Grizzlies, and not to like disparage his brother Powell, but my like 20-year-old memory basically is that, like, all right, okay, it's not 20 years, but whatever. Like Powell's final year, it was like, all right, he's getting kind of shoved around inside. I don't feel like his fight's totally there. Maybe he seems a little bit checked out, and I don't know if that checks out at all. That's just my memory. And I remember Mark's first games the following year, I was like, oh, this guy fights in there, you know, and it was just like, all of a sudden it was different. He had the Gasol name, but I'm like, no, that guy gets the contested rebound. That guy is pushing people around. That guy competes. And also, like, this maybe formed my whole, like, maybe one of my personas for my basketball podcasting analysis was I was always like, maybe there were some players who like put up big stats in the NBA. And I was like the one that pops to mind is like DeMarcus Cousins. I was never a DeMarcus Cousins fan, where I was like, you're telling me Marc Gasol wouldn't win more games with those guys? There's no way Marc Gasol would lose that many games 5 years in a row. You know, like in my mind, Marc Gasol, whatever he averaged, like 15 and 8, his team's going to win. And I don't care if Boogie averages 30 a game. Like in my mind, Marc is way better than Boogie Cousins ever was. And so like, that was just like something about the way Marc's playing style. I mean, it was just probably some amount of homerism, you know, and I'm cheering for my guy, but I'm like, that guy knows how to win and he'll do anything to get that victory. Also, I feel like one of the great what ifs is like, what if Marc Gasol played in today's game where like, you know, you said he was unselfish to a fault. Sometimes that was passing up shots and stuff. And while he was in the league, he had the most assists of any center. But back then, centers weren't, you know, that as involved with passing. It's a little more so now with like Sabonis and, of course, Jokic. I'm not saying Marc would have been Jokic, but like Marc, one, would have launched threes like he did late in his career. Like if Marc was here today, I feel like his stats, he would shoot so many 3-pointers. He would get so many assists. I feel like he might even be more made for today's game. Although he, of course, you know, dominated his own era. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
And he'd probably tell you that, if you asked him, would you dominate today's game? He'd just,
he's like,
because that's how he always was. He was just like, I don't know, you know, just like I said, he was the smartest guy on the floor. His IQ was amazing. Yeah, he would have figured out how to play in any era. And if he was playing in today's era, yeah, he would have shot more threes probably and been successful at it. I think he could have done whatever just because he was a smart basketball player. And you know, that unselfishness was always about winning. It was about getting the right, you know, Marc would say it after games all the time. It was about making the right play.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Marc was a guy that just made the right play and always strived to make the right play. And, you know, whether that was him shooting a three or him driving to the basket or him passing out, whatever we would take, he would get it done. And so, yeah, I think he'd be fine today. I don't know if he'd be better because he was a dominant force. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
There weren't many nights where you felt like, you know, maybe a handful of nights where you thought, okay, this is going to be a really tough matchup. Other than that, it was like, he's going to dominate tonight. And most of those nights he did.
I remember getting spoiled during maybe the heights of the grit and grind era. I want to say it was like, it might've been the start of the 2016 season where the Grizzlies got blown out like 2 of the first 4 or 5 games or something. And it was such a bizarre feeling where it was like, we don't ever, like, we're always in it, you know, like Marc always has us in the game and, you know, Mike and Zebo, whatever. One part of so Marc Gasol's legacy for the Grizzlies, and one part of actually that I think is super interesting about the Steven Adams trade is actually how you can trace the lineage of both of those guys to Sharif Abdul-Rahim.
Right.
And the fact, I find this so interesting, and it's part of like team building in the NBA. It's a legit part of it. Like you don't lose an asset for nothing. Like that's a big part of it. And so like even like Dylan Brooks leaving in the off season, they got a traded player exception out of it. So like you never want to basically leave or lose an asset for nothing. You're always trading away guys like Courtney Lee, final year of his deal. You're gonna trade him away. Xavier Tillman now going into unrestricted free agency. Highly likely they trade him for something because you just don't want to have a guy leave for nothing. And going back to like this like draft pick lineage of Sharif Abdul-Rahim, even if you ignore draft picks, the Grizzlies have gotten a good player, like a literal player going back. This is like 25 years. Like they drafted Sharif. The Vancouver Grizzlies took Sharif Abdul-Rahim 1996. Was like, what, I think 5 seasons of him. He was traded directly for Pau Gasol. And of course, Brevin Knight and Lorenzen Wright. And so like you got that on-court play. Pau Gasol gave us all those years. And then he was traded the very next season, Marc Gasol. So like you're getting these direct players. Marc Gasol was traded, of course, for Jonas Valanciunas. Jonas Valanciunas was traded for Steven Adams. And like we've had direct on-court, like a good player, weirdly a good big, the whole time. Right. Like this has been the lifeblood of 2.5 decades of this Grizzlies franchise. And I'll be honest, I'm a little worried the bloodline's going to die off because like if they buy out Oladipo, it's over, Rob. It's been extinguished. It's been snuffed out.
The line is over. Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe with the 2nd round pick.
So I'm not including the draft picks. That feels like that feels like cheating. We haven't done draft picks yet. Like I think the last bits, like we traded, we got Eric Bledsoe, and that turned into like Daniel Laturu and Jarrett Culver and Carson Edwards, Chris Dunn. We waived all those guys.
Yeah.
So we're like snuffing out the bloodline, and it was just Steven Adams left. Now it's Oladipo. I'm honestly a little bit sad about that.
A little bit sad. It's about to come to an end. I don't know. Maybe for your sake, maybe they'll trade Oladipo and get something for him.
Man, we got to get a player. I don't want it to end.
Right.
I don't want the chart. I don't want the flow chart to end. Let's talk a little bit about the Cavaliers game. We'll do that right after this short break. Hey there, listeners. I want to tell you guys again about Underdog Fantasy. If you want to play fantasy sports for cash, if you want to get involved with best ball tournaments, if you want to play daily fantasy against your friends, if you want to play higher or lowers, you can do all of that at Underdog Fantasy. And if you sign up right now using promo code FBBF or by clicking the link in this episode's description, Underdog will match your opening deposit up to $100. Give Underdog Fantasy a try. Remember that promo code FBBF or click the link in this episode's description, and remember, Underdog will match your opening deposit up to $100. All right, so Rob, the Grizzlies did play a basketball game. I'll be real. I was kind of in a fog watching it at home because I was more like thinking about it's a big trade. I hadn't thought about this. The Grizzlies hung in it. This unfortunately played out a lot like the previous two games where they were in it. I think the Pacers game, they were tied with 4 minutes left. The Kings game, they were up with 4 minutes left. This one, they had a lead early in the fourth quarter, but they lost. A lot of it, you give credit to Jaren, and Santi Aldama had a big game. Vince Williams Jr. had a big game. What were your takeaways from this loss before I pin my own blame on
I think it was the same as you mentioned. It was the same as the previous two games. Credit to this team for their effort. Credit to this team for their fight. Credit them for moving the basketball and getting themselves the ball moving offensively, which stopped a little bit in the fourth quarter against Cleveland. But they've done everything that you could hope for a team that's got this makeup. And the problem is when you get to the fourth quarter, you're facing really good teams. And B, you're facing teams that have been together for a long time that know how to finish games. And the Grizzlies are struggling finishing games, whether it's a bad turnover or a bad shot, whatever. And then Donovan Mitchell comes down and buries a three on you. It's that's just where you are right now. And it's, it gets tiring saying on television, well, it was a good effort. Good job. You worked really hard, but you just fell short. You hate because you don't want them to be moral victories. You don't want it to be, well, it's okay to lose. You don't want to have that mentality either. But to this team's credit, they've put themselves in position to win games. Yeah. They did for 3 in a row. And those were similar games too. That came down to the wire and they executed and made the plays down the stretch. And now these three have been very similar as well. Except they've been on the losing end. So, the reality is what it is. And right now if it comes down to crunch time and comes down to fourth quarter game, it's going to be tough for a team that's got two-way guys and G League guys and, guys who haven't played on the floor together at all this season, being out there together. So it's going to be tough to finish these games. And, you hate to give a pat on the back, and I know the players don't want to hear it either, but boy, they've given it everything. And, the teams that you're playing, they haven't been able to go to their bench. They haven't been able to empty the bench. And, they've had to play the entire 48 minutes, and the Grizzlies have given them all they could handle. So I think the Grizzlies are doing what, you hope they do, and that's just be in position to possibly get a win in the fourth quarter. And they've been doing that in the last 6 games, and they're 3-3 in those games. And, hopefully they just keep playing that way. Because last night was the Orlando game and last night's game, the last couple of home games were both exciting. The crowd was in it. I think the crowd appreciating the effort that you're seeing from this bunch. And, so it's been, the last 6 games have been much better than the first 25 games.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this team is really, like you mentioned, the ball movement. This team throughout January and now in the first game of February, like they are really sharing the ball really well. And you're seeing a lot of, I feel like, improvements in that area. Of course, it bogs down, at the end of games. And this was like, you look at the matchup. This was one of the league's best road teams against one of the league's worst home teams. And that worst home team is starting, Scottie Pippen Jr., and of course, the Grizzlies led for most of it. And it's just like, I see this a lot where people are like, we complain like about like the final minutes and about like whether it's maybe like that play call was bad or the coaching, what are they doing? Or the reffing's terrible. Or if we had just could have grabbed that one defensive rebound, like this could have happened. But like, this is what NBA basketball is. When you have a lot of the time, when you have a shorthanded roster and you're playing an extremely talented roster, you hang in, until the end. And then the cream rises to the crop, and the good team knows how to execute down the stretch. The other team has De'Aaron Fox or Donovan Mitchell or somebody. You're like, well, that was that. For a couple stats from this one, Jaren picked up 5 assists again. He now has 5 or more assists in 5 games since January started. And he came into last month with only 2 in his career. So like Jaren is obviously facing a lot of defensive attention, and he's finding his teammates, allowing them to score. I feel like Santi had another just tremendous game, carrying the offensive load, doing a lot for the Grizzlies there. I have to point out
what I liked about Santi's game too was it wasn't just threes. Yeah. I mean, he knocked down threes. He did, but he also took the ball to the basket. And, I think when Santi, I don't want to say struggles because he's been doing really well, but when Santi kind of gets stagnant is when he's just a 3-point shooter. Because when he's just a 3-point shooter, he's not using his talents and his ability that he's got to get to the basket. And I thought he did that last night really well, not only knocking down the 3, but also playing around the basket and getting some buckets in the paint. He's got to be that guy. He's got to be a rebounder. He's got to be a scorer. And last night he was very good. 9 rebounds last night as well.
Yeah. I mean, he really filled up the whole box score. A couple of guys who struggled a little bit. Unfortunately, Gigi Jackson and David Roddy had evenings to forget. Both of them really struggling from the field. And it's one of those games where it's just like, if you guys could have just made like, I don't know, like 2 more.
3.
So Roddy was 1 out of 12 from the field. Gigi Jackson was 3 out of 14. Here's your random cherry picked stat from me. This was the 6th time in franchise history that the team had 2 players in the same game, both take at least 12 field goal attempts and only make under 22% of those field goal attempts. This is again, incredibly cherry picked, but it brings up some fun names. The other examples. So Mark and Mike did it twice. Fair enough. And then we have Troy Daniels and Andrew Harrison.
Oh,
in 2016.
Andrew Harrison. Wow.
We have Matt Barnes and JaMychal Green. In a season that really kind of resembles this one, I feel like. And then you go back to 2012, Rudy Gay and Jeremy Pargo.
Wow.
Both did it.
Jeremy Pargo. Oof.
Yeah, this was a game where like, I don't feel like Roddy's shots were particularly bad. He was just missing them. This felt like a young player, raw player game for Gigi, where I was watching, be like, hey man, could you just like maybe turn it down a little bit? like your shots aren't going in. Maybe stop doing the deep pull-ups. But he's been such a positive, I don't know, breath of fresh air in this discouraging season. Maybe you don't want to tamp down his.
Yeah, and what I liked from Gigi last night was, one, when he was aggressive going to the bat, and Jared Allen had one of the great blocks of the year. That was
so good.
Was spectacular. But it didn't stop Gigi from going to the basket. And so I liked that. For a 19-year-old to get blocked like that, but to go back to the well, I thought was impressive. And when he wasn't shooting well, which he didn't throughout the night, he was still playing defense. So I thought that was good to see. Those are my thing with Gigi Jackson is, those first 2 games were great. He scored 20 points in each game, and it was awesome to see. One of them against the Warriors, who we'll see tonight. But I think, I want to see Gigi Jackson make an impact without scoring. And I thought last night he made an impact without being good offensively. So that's what I kind of look at with him. And I think we've seen that, where he had a 10-point game in Toronto but made a huge impact on the game, in a victory. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from him, that he's not letting, Taylor Jenkins talks about it all the time, that next play mentality. He's not letting struggles offensively hurt him on the defensive end. He's moving on to the next play. And so I think that's been a good sign with Gigi.
Yeah, he's clearly had those moments where he's blocked shots, and he's a pretty solid rebounder. And of course, he gets to the line, pretty good rate. Not so much in this game, but he's definitely flashed a lot of good stuff. Finally, from this game, sort of odd circumstances with no Xavier Tillman, where he was scratched after the game started for the second time this season. Of course, conspiracy theorists were all,
a trade, another trade.
What is this? Who is unexpectedly not playing tonight? And also Derrick Rose popped up as doubtful for this game. Or is there any word? Is Derrick Rose hopefully going to come back on Friday or maybe early next week?
That was the I think that was the hope. Was that maybe one of the games this weekend? Luke Kennard, same thing. Maybe one of the games this weekend. If not, maybe it'll be in the East Coast trip to Boston and New York. But it seems as though it's a lot closer. And when the Grizzlies players move up on designation, it usually means that they're on the verge of coming back. So I'll be interested to see what the injury report is today, and what we'll see tonight, because I don't know. I don't know if Derrick Rose moves up just yet. And if he does, is he going to start? I don't know. I mean, it's been so long. I don't know. I don't know what'll happen there.
I don't. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I have difficulty getting in the I guess the mental space of a player, a professional athlete who unfortunately gets hurt a lot. Part of me as a fan, or I watch NFL games, and it used to just be all about I want my guy to run for 150 yards. And now as an adult, I'm should he get more carries? That guy has 20. I'm worried. You have your fantasy football team, and you're he seems hurt. I kind of wish he would just rest. And then I think about Derrick Rose, where it's he's hurting his hamstring or his knee every time he plays. I feel bad for him, and I know I would not want to hurt my hamstring. That's a miserable feeling, and so I feel bad for him. Where it's does he need to? Does he have to play? I kind of want to win, and I feel he can help us win, but also I don't want the poor guy to get injured again.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's
maybe that's the Mad Men.
I don't.
That's what the money's for.
I don't know what those minutes should be like for Derrick. I don't know. I don't know what's too much. Because we've seen when it's been too much, he's gotten hurt. So I don't know how you balance that line of what is too much for Derrick Rose. I mean, do you have to say, well, we just can't start him because we can't have him out there for that many minutes, or what? So I don't know. We'll see when he comes back, and hopefully that's going to be soon, and hopefully Luke will be back soon, and just to get some bodies back would be good. Because even last week I looked at the lineup, and I was like, well, the starting lineup's not that bad. And it was what comes after that's where the problem is. And now you look at it and you're the starting lineup. Oh, geez. We got Jaren and a bunch of guys
in the Cavs game on Thursday night. The Grizzlies won the non-Vince Williams Jr. minutes in the first half, and I was rubbing my hands together, oh, here we go. We won the minutes without Vince. We haven't done that in forever. Last thing, this is probably the least I've talked about Vince Williams Jr. on an episode in the last 2 months.
Right.
Do you know, does it exist anywhere, a list of all the international paper players of the game?
I don't think we have a list.
I doubt it, because that's I want that. I want to know.
You want that list?
I want to know who has the most, because here's the thing. Vince has gotten it 6, 7, 8 times this year.
Right.
Which is a stunning number.
Yes.
And I was just curious, I need to be able to go on Basketball Reference and be guys, Tony Allen only got 6 in his whole career. Or something. I was wondering, because I was back in the day, that's highly contested. It's basically going to Mark or Mike, or whoever. Yeah. And it's and then it was Jaren, and obviously Ja and Dez. And of course, this season, has gone poorly. There's been some opportunities for others, but I was like, dang, Vince won another one. I was like, I feel like he might have caught Tony Allen.
I'm going to have to talk to the truck, see if we can get a list.
I mean, how far back can we go? I know we got to go back to the Fox Sports.
Right.
Maybe there was like UPN back in the day. I don't know how that syndication was working or whatever.
Right.
I need a log. I need an all-time log.
I'll see if we can get that for you. Santi got it in the Cleveland game.
Yeah, Santi, great game. Santi's probably had a handful. I mean, listen, if you need somebody to go through the logs, I'm not saying I'll volunteer, but I'd do it for a very cheap rate.
Okay, all right, I'll pass that along.
Like if you like a $15 an hour thing, just we can work something out. I take cash. It's fine.
Sure.
Anyways, Rob, thanks so much for coming on. Obviously it was a big last 24 hours for the Grizzlies, and I appreciate you giving all your insight and entertainment about that. And then we'll watch you tonight on the broadcast, and hopefully you'll come on very soon.
Yeah, anytime, Keith. Always a pleasure, man. Thank you much.
Thanks, Rob.